He's done it before, and he'll do it again. But in this game, Magnus Carlsen's brutal humiliation of a chess grandmaster using dubious opening moves is extra special because he's using an opening named after his own special status, which according to some is greatest of all time. Yes, I am calling this the GOAT opening, and with a little imagination, you can probably guess why. But if you can't, here's a little visual aid to help you out. Now this is an opening setup that Magnus has employed a number of times over the course of his illustrious trolling career, but perhaps never to such devastating effect as in the game you're about to witness. His opponent, Grandmaster Andrey Gorovets, is able to successfully navigate the bizarre opening territory that Magnus has dragged him into, up until about move 9 anyway, when he's still got a bit of an advantage, but by move 13, it's basically game over. And after another 11 engine-perfect moves from the machine mind of Magnus, including 2 stunning piece sacrifices, it's literally game over. How Magnus is able to play with such blinding precision in a blitz game such as this, played on Titled Tuesday in February of last year, is one of the great enigmas of our time, and one that will probably never be solved. But enough hoopla, let's have a look at some moves. Magnus Carlsen is tending the white herd, and he opens with A4. Now I know what you're saying, this opening already has a name, it's called the where opening, but bear with me because after Andrey's response, G6, E4 from Magnus, C5, and H4, we do have on the board the dreaded GOAT formation, as indicated by these here pawns on E4 and H4. Now this opening might still have a name depending on what moves black has played or will play, but I like calling it the GOAT, at least when Magnus plays it, and I think it'll catch on and make its appearance in the MCO within a few years at most. Andrey continues knight to f6, inviting Magnus to attack his knight with e5, which just might be best, but he instead goes for the generic knight to c3. And after Andrey mirrors him with knight to c6, he puts his bishop on b5, increasing his control of the center by attacking one of his opponent's central controllers. This strategy is loosely applicable to real life, where you can either improve your status by doing something well, or by attacking someone who does it better than you, assuming of course that you have no moral compass, but I digress. Andrey now responds to Magnus's attempt to control the center by actually occupying it with knight to d4, giving a counter kick to his bishop, which Magnus goes ahead and leaves right where it is with knight to f3. Now if Andrey were to take that bishop with knight takes b5, which he does not, then after a takes b5, Magnus would have the 3 versus 1 lead in piece development with his newly activated rook on a1, whose view of the pawn on a7 could soon become significant. For example, after the engine's top line, d6, d4, c takes d4, and queen takes d4, hitting that pawn a second time, which the engine says black should just sacrifice now with bishop to g7, when he does have some compensation, though probably not nearly enough. What's played in the game is an immediate bishop to g7. When in doubt, it's probably gout. I mean, get the pieces out. Sorry, wrong saying. Magnus now decides to push his pawn to e5, but here it's not so great anymore. Better would have been a simple d3 activating the brunette bishop, since after Andrey's very strong reply, knight to h5, this pawn on e5 is probably a bit overextended and more of a liability than anything else. Magnus now plays d3, getting his bishop's one eye on f4. Maybe he's thinking about a potential g4 to try to trap that pony on h5, but Andrey strikes first with a6, driving the bishop to c4, thereby unpinning his d-pawn, which he is now able to push to d6, activating his light squared bishop, covering that g4 square, and so preventing Magnus from pushing his pawn there. But this is not the end of the e5 story. As is so often the case, Magnus Carlsen has a little trick up his sleeve with the move he plays next, knight to g5, hitting f7 with 2 pieces while also defending that g4 square with his queen. So without saying anything else, I'll just put the question out there. What should black play in this position? Well, the best move, and in fact the only one that doesn't lose, is going to be to simply castle. And if white tries to trap that knight on h5 with g4, then black can just play bishop takes g4, seeing that queen takes g4 can be met with knight takes c2 check, forking king and rook. So after king to f1 and knight takes a1, if white were to try to win that knight on a1, starting with, let's say, queen to e2 to keep it from going back to c2, well, black has a bunch of winning moves here. Bishop takes e5 is pretty straightforward, just grabbing another pawn, so even if white does somehow round up the knight, which he probably won't, black will still have a winning material advantage. What Andrey tries in the game, in response to the scary looking knight to g5, is not a correct and cool-headed castling, but rather his second best move in the position, and a losing one, d5, attacking the bishop on c4, while blocking its view of f7. Of course, that pawn is not adequately defended and can now be captured with either bishop takes d5 or knight takes d5, but which move is better? Well, if you live your life by the evaluation of the engine, which, let's face it, we all do, then knight takes d5 is the only way to win, for reasons that include, but are not necessarily limited to, the fact that it allows white to kick the knight out of d4 with the move c3, thus relieving the white queen of her duty of guarding against that knight fork on c2. Maybe the queen can then go to f3, increasing the pressure on f7. Maybe g4 will be played. All depends on how black reacts. Magnus does not go down this road, though. He decides to take with the bishop, to which black should again respond by simply castling, leaving white slightly behind in development with this still attacked pawn on e5, which he's got no great way to defend. f4 would just further weaken the king side, allowing black's sidelined knight to reroute to greener pastures via the g3 square with tempo on the rook. So pushing the pawn to e6 would probably be best. g4 could still be met with bishop takes g4, same as before. But Andrey does not castle as he should. He decides to try e6, a losing blunder, though not obviously so. White has a single crushing move in this position. Pause the video if you want to try and spot it. The winning move, not found by Magnus, and it's actually the last one that he misses, since after this he pretty much plays like a computer for the rest of the game. But the move is bishop to f3, with the simple threat of bishop takes knight, pawn takes bishop, and queen takes pawn on h5, which will be coming with the threat of checkmate on f7 if black doesn't castle, or on h7 even if he does castle. So black would have no time to counter this with any knight to c2 check. The knight on h5 of course has nowhere to run. Black has several moves he can try here, some of which lead to some pretty crazy variations that we're not going to get into. The most obvious try might be to take the bishop on f3, but after queen takes f3, white's threatening both queen takes f7 mate and g4 trapping the knight. So that's about everything you need to know, assuming you don't need to know everything. We're not going to dignify this game with too much in-depth analysis. What Magnus plays in the game, in response to the blunderous e6, is not the winning bishop to f3, but rather the probably drawing bishop to a2. Andrey grabs the pawn on e5, as he should. Magnus puts his knight on e4, a very strong move, as all of his moves will be for the remainder of this game. He's now attacking the undefended pawn on c5, to which black really needs to respond h6, kicking the knight out of g5. Then he can go ahead and defend the pawn on c5 if he wants to, even though he doesn't need to, and therefore probably shouldn't, seeing that knight takes c5 can be met with queen to a5 check, picking up the knight. But this is blitz, and such things will be missed, even at the rarefied GM level, so what's played is the horrifically weak and decisively losing b6, defending c5, maybe thinking about bishop to b7, who even knows. But this sets off all of Magnus's tactical alarm bells. He knows he's got a little something here, and he knows it begins with the move c3, attacking the knight on d4, which would love to go to f5 because knights just love the f5 square. In case you didn't know, it's just beautiful, really nice square. Unfortunately, that would fail to the move g4, forking the knights. So to c6 we go. Magnus is now able to put his queen on f3, getting lined up with that undefended knight while threatening some checkmate on f7. Not the kind of thing you love to see as black, assuming you're trying to observe a mate-free lifestyle. But Andrey doesn't panic, he just castles. Was it the best move? Definitely not. Queen to c7, while still losing, would have been a bit more resilient, adding defense to both of these sensitive squares, while not castling right into a ready-made kingside attack, which is what Magnus has here, beginning with g4, attacking the knight on h5. At least it's not getting trapped anymore. It can go to g7, but here comes Harry at the h-pawn, looking to open up Horace the h-file, along which Ronald the rook. Okay, I'll stop. Simon Williams does it much better. Andrey captures the pawn, seeing that rook takes h5 would just lose the exchange. So he's probably expecting Magnus to recapture with the pawn. Then maybe he can play h6 to boot the knight out of g5, get his king off of the g-file, and with a little luck, or I should say a lot of luck, a miraculous amount of luck, he might just survive. But Magnus has a little surprise in store for him. White's got a multitude of winning moves in this position, but pause the video if you'd like to try and spot the most decisive one. The move, now played by Magnus, is a sacrifice of a piece with knight takes h7. And in case anyone's wondering why I said that black should have kicked that knight out of g5 when he had the chance with the move h6 instead of playing b6, well, here's your answer. Andrey goes ahead and takes the knight. He's got nothing better. This allows Magnus to play knight to g5 with check and a discovered attack on the undefended c6 knight. Andrey puts his king back on g8. Why not h8? I don't know. You tell me in the comments. Magnus goes ahead and takes the horse head on c6, attacking the rook on a8, while removing the defender of the bishop on e5 and so threatening queen to e4, attacking that loose bishop while also threatening checkmate on h7. So not looking too good for Team Black here. Andrey will be losing some material despite his very tricky response, queen takes d3, guarding that e4 square while threatening to meet queen takes a8 with bishop takes c3 check, b takes c3, and queen takes c3 check, forking king and rook. The engine's saying that would still be totally winning for white, but why allow such nonsense when you can just play Magnus's next move, rook to h3, booting that queen right out of there. She goes to d6, Magnus now takes the rook on a8, we have rook to d8 threatening checkmate in 1, might as well try. Magnus does take notice, he plays bishop to e3, defending d1 with his rook. Andrey now sees that the pawn on g4 is undefended and that he can capture it with an attack on Magnus's rook, so that's exactly what he does. But this allows Magnus to make a move that immediately ends the game. It's very pretty, very instructive, and it's a tactical pattern that you're going to want to burn deep into your psyche. Pause the video one more time if you want to try and spot it. The apocalyptic tactical shot now uncorked by the great Magnus Carlsen is rook to h8 check. Andrey has only one legal move, but he doesn't even bother making it. He resigns the game, seeing that king takes h8 will be met with knight takes f7 check, forking king and queen. So what a beautiful tactic to finish off this crazy game. Not too hard to see once you know it's there, but spotting these kinds of things in the frantic fog of blitz is something that no mortal is ever able to do with 100% consistency, although it seems that Magnus Carlsen has come pretty darn close. So keep working those tactics so you can be just like Magnus, at least every now and then. Subscribe to this channel if you want to see more content not unlike this in the near future. Leave a comment with anything that's on your mind. Leave a like. Those things really help the channel out, and I will see you next time.